Hi. A doctor for 53 years, first in hospitals, then as a suburban family general practitioner, and then with my own mental health and addiction clinic in which I treated over 5,000 addicts in over 40,000 consultations. I found that the most important things for having a good life were mental health, enough good relationships, no bad close relationships, and no addictions. The people who suffered most were people who had mental health problems, not enough good relationships, some bad relationships, and addictions. And what I observed was that these problems were very common and growing, and that there was never going to be enough doctors and psychologists and therapists and counselors to help all the people who needed help. In fact, lots of people got no help, and nobody seemed to get enough help. And it was costing the country a fortune in the police service and the prisons and the hospitals and the healthcare services and welfare payments and lost income taxes. In fact, this seemed to me to be the biggest problem. Even problems like wars seem to be caused by mental health problems. And I became very interested in finding why we had this very big problem, why so many people were suffering so severely, and whether there was any possible solution. There were lots of problems and lots of weaknesses, and I'd like to tell you about a few of them. In 1997, I started to work 10 hours a week in a heroin clinic, or an addiction clinic, but it was mainly heroin. And I wanted to know what caused addiction problems. And I went to all the addiction clinics in Perth and Sydney and couldn't find a single addiction worker who could tell me what caused addictions. Or just generalizations like, oh, they're dickerheads chasing highs. But my experience in life is that nothing happens without a cause. Everything that happens has causes. Addiction must have causes. Mental ill health must have causes. What were they? One day when I was working in this clinic where I worked 10 hours a week, I saw 15 heroin addicts, and 5 of them had ADD, ADHD. And that made me start to ask every addict about their early life their childhood, their family, how they got on at school, and so on. And I found that 19 out of 20 of them had had serious mental health issues or distresses or disorders before they started to take addictive drugs. They hadn't got good mental health care, and they ended up getting street mental health care, street drugs, which were always addictive. And what I found was that 19 out of 20 of them had about about six or eight common disorders that 19 out of 20 had, and they usually had more than one, usually two or three. The commonest one was anxiety or worry disorders, general anxiety, social anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive disorder, phobias, fear of various things, major depression, bipolar disorder, highs and lows, attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADD or ADHD, post-traumatic stress disorders, terrible emotional and physical attacks after usually after witnessing a near-death experience that was very frightening or very painful, which they experienced or they were close to someone who experienced it. Very low self-esteem. Some of them had come from pretty low situations or from far away and had very low self-esteem. And a few people with schizophrenia and a few people with autism. And if they had anxiety disorders, they often had depression. And if they had attention ADD or ADHD, they often had anxiety and or depression and or a very low self-esteem. So there was a major problem for them that in the 1970s in Western Australia they separated mental health care from addiction care. And there were mental health clinics and there were addiction clinics. And the mental health clinics looked after people with mental health problems, but they would not see addicts. And the addiction clinics treated the addicts, but they would not treat their mental health disorders. An addict could have very obvious mental health disorders and they wouldn't even look at it or treat it, even if it was very obvious and comparatively easy to improve. Not to cure, of course. And they had this idea that addictions tended to cause mental health disorders, but what I observed was although addiction makes mental health disorders worse, what nearly always happened was the mental health addictions came first, and if they didn't get good treatment for them, then they got street treatment and became addicts. So I realized that what they needed was what we call dual diagnosis. Dual diagnosis is diagnosing and treating a person's mental health disorders at the same time as treating their addiction. And I started to do that. I wasn't an expert, but I had to learn. And of course, all family doctors, I'd been a family doctor for 34 years at that time, have to deal with a lot of mental health problems because there are such long waiting lists at free mental health clinics, and because psychiatric and psychological care is so expensive. So I knew a bit about it, and I just had to learn more and more and more. And the results were wonderful. When people got relief from their mental health distresses and weaknesses, they were much more able to quit their drugs and to avoid relapses. And because no one else was doing it, I quickly got swamped, got very, very busy. And I started to look for ways to help. I employed a psychiatrist one day a week at my own expense, and he helped a lot of the worst patients, and of course I learnt a lot from him. But when I could no longer afford to pay him, he bowed out. He could get the Medicare fees, but they weren't enough. So then I made a 20-question checklist and got my nurse to see the patients first and do the checklist with them, and then when I saw them I could just look at the checklist and see which of the problems they had, and in 3 minutes know as much as it would take me 23 minutes or 33 minutes to find out if I had to deal with them direct. And I also made some videos, because everybody with addiction and mental health problems doesn't need just to have them treated, they need to understand those problems, and they need to understand what causes them, and they need to understand the alternative treatments. And I didn't have time to do that with everyone, but the advantage of the videos was they could look at the videos as many times as they wanted. If someone goes to a doctor to get, or a psychologist or a counsellor to get things explained, if they don't get it the first time, it's going to be quite a long time before they can ask again, or there may not be time for them to ask again, but they can watch a video 3 times straight off, and then again the next day as well. But the problem was that the videos were 7 to 12 minutes, and the first 10-minute video got 10,000 viewings in 9 months, which was very good, but it wasn't very long before people weren't watching long videos. I thought I needed to make them better, so I made 31 7 to 12 minute videos and took great care with them, and they still didn't look at them. And then I found out that what I had to do was make 1 minute videos. I went from 7 to 12 minute videos to 5 minutes to 3 minutes to 2 minutes and then 1 minute. And they watch 1 minute videos. That worked very well, except that to cover everything with 1 minute videos, you need 100. You can't cover all of mental health and addiction and relationships in 10 1 minute videos. So I made 50 and then 60 and 70, and now I've got over 100. And they cover almost everything. But if you've got a problem and there are 100 videos, which ones do you watch? Technology had progressed, and what we did next was to make an app. And the app asks questions about all aspects of a person's life, including their mental health and their relationships and any substance abuse. And we had to keep the app fairly short too. To cover all aspects of those things, we had to ask 38 questions, and 38 questions, the person would just see each question come up and they'd have 3 possible answers, and they'd tap their choice of the 3 possible answers, and they could do the 38 questions in about 10 minutes. And they needed to repeat the app often, because every time they read a question and asked themselves which of those things is my answer, they got clearer about their problems. So repeating the app was a great aid in helping people to understand themselves and their problems. And the app didn't, if they tapped the no, it's not a problem answer twice to a question, that question only got asked every 4th time. So quite quickly they were only being asked half as many questions, and they could do that in 5 minutes, or anything from 3 to 7 minutes. And the app gave them, the app is, we call the Mental Fix-It app, the Mental Fix-It app. And the app gives an instant report. You go to your phone and you look for the icon or the button for the App Store or Google Play and tap on it, and in 10 seconds you can download the app, and it's free. And then in 10 minutes you go tap, 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 tap your choice of answers, and as you tap your choice of answers for the last question, an instant report comes up on the screen, and the instant report tells you the things that you need to know. It tells you which 6 1-minute videos will most help you with your particular problems. It tells you which medicines are most likely to work for you. It gives you a list of all the things that you have tapped as being a moderate or a severe problem. And as you repeat the app, the report gives you a graph of your scores, your total scores. Each time you do the app, it adds up the scores for all the answers you've tapped moderate or severe, and gives you a total score, and puts that total score into a graph. So when you've done the app 3 times, you've got a graph of the 3 total scores, and if you're on the right treatment, your scores are going down. Some of the things that were severe have become moderate, some of the things that were moderate have become mild, or even got better. So as soon as the report comes up at the end of doing the app, you can tell immediately at a glance whether your treatment is working and your score is going down, or whether the treatment is not working and you have to find some other treatment to successfully treat your problems. I want to tell you how I see this whole mental health thing now. We would all get happier and healthier if we realized that we all started life as a tiny little baby that was almost helpless and very dependent, and realized that all of us, starting as a very dependent, helpless baby and growing, went through periods of unmet needs and nasty experiences. Times when we were very hungry and cold and wet, and for some reason we didn't get fed and we didn't get dried and warmed for half an hour, and we cried and cried and got worried and felt lonely, and maybe even eventually started to get a bit angry. So what we must realize is that we weren't victimized. It's just that there were never any perfect parents and never any perfect families. There were always some problems, and our world and our community were never perfect. Also, that if distressed feelings, thoughts and behaviours were severe or happened often, they became habits. And those habits could last for years or for a lifetime, and often got worse and often caused other problems. ADD, ADHD caused school problems. School problems cause people to be looked down upon and weakened their employment prospects, which weakened their incomes which could lead to getting sacked and having no money, to being cold and poor and hungry, even to being homeless. So the bad habits arising from distressing experience, nasty experiences and unmet needs could cause a lot of trouble. And habits that could last for years or a lifetime. But we also need to realize that all bad habits can be broken, and far better new habits can always be made. So as soon as possible, start getting everything fixed that's troubling you, a bit at a time. On your phone, in 10 seconds, find the App Store or Google Play icon or button and tap it. And in 10 seconds, you can download the Mental Fix-It app. Then in 10 minutes, you can tap your choice of answers to all its questions and get an instant report. And then in 10 minutes, you can read that report and look at the 6 videos it says will help you most. So in half an hour, you can be miles in front. And every time you repeat that process, you get clearer and clearer about what the problems are, what you want to stop, what you want to start, and how to be happier and healthier. And happiness and healthiness go together. As a doctor for 53 years, I never knew that. Never knew that. And I think that most people don't know that happiness and healthiness go together, and that unhappiness and sickness go together. And how is that? Well, we've got about 60 different chemicals in our brain that affect how we feel, and that through electrical flows and chemical flows manage our life. And when we are stressed and having problems, that depresses our happy chemistry. Our happy chemistry is mainly dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin and over 20 endorphin chemicals. The endorphins stand for endogenous morphine, because we all produce morphine type chemicals. And those morphine type chemicals and the other chemicals make us feel happier, relieve pain, relieve distress, make us happier. But also the endorphins manage our immune system, and our immune system is cells and antibodies and chemicals in every part of our body that fight infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases and cancers. So when we're stressed, it depresses our endorphins, and depressed endorphins means a weaker immune system, which increases the chances of sickliness or sickness. And when we're happy, our happy chemistry is high, and our immune system is stronger, and we're less likely to get sick or to be sickly. And a very important thing I learned after I've been a doctor for more than 50 years is how important smiling is. Science has now proved that not only do we smile when our happy chemistry is high, but when we smile, that boosts our brain's production of happy chemistry. We get higher levels of happy chemistry. I'd come from circles where you were encouraged to be very serious. Nobody ever said that it was good to smile or to laugh, but it is good to smile and to laugh. And we should smile and laugh as much as possible, because that increases the amount of happy chemistry in our brain and our body, and that also improves our immune system, which fights infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases and cancers. It's our duty, and it's to our benefit and our family's benefit, if every day when we wake up we say, whenever possible today, I'm going to smile or laugh. It makes a great difference to your life if you smile as much as you can. And smiling not just affects you, it affects the people you're with. When you smile, they smile. This is a little bit controversial and you may not agree with it, but in my experience, females smile more than males. When you meet a girl or a lady, they usually smile at you. A guy might smile at you or they might not. And I think they do that because that makes you, a male, less likely to bully them or to be bossy with them, because females are mostly not as strong physically. I think they're strong mentally, but not as strong physically as males, and they have been dominated and exploited in many societies. I'm happy to say not nearly as much as they used to be in Australia, but in Australia we still have one woman every 4 days killed by her ex-partner, by her partner or ex-partner. And domestic violence, mostly males, some females, but mostly males, is a great problem. And you can partly fix it just by smiling, because when you smile, the other person is likely to smile, and then the relationship will be better. Our whole life depends on our chemistry and our electricity. Everything that happens in us, everything we do, is the result of messages, electrical messages that flow in our nerves, or chemical messages that flow in our blood. And it's so important to pay attention to our chemistry. And our chemistry developed over hundreds of thousands of years in humans who mostly had a vegetable diet, a fibrous vegetable diet, and they ate some meat and fish as well, but the animals that they ate were very active. They ran, they raced. They didn't stand shoulder to shoulder in a feedlot and hardly move and just eat and hardly move and grow a lot of fat. So we need to be aware of where our chemistry came from. And another very important factor in our chemistry is that our ancestors lived very close together. Most of them lived in the same group for their whole life of people, many of whom were their relatives, and they were all alike. They were mostly similar, and they all knew every one another. And the kids thought they had 10 grandmothers because all the old ladies looked after them. And they thought they had 42 cousins because all the other kids, they were close to all the other kids. And there were no brick walls. I remember once when I was going to the medical school in Adelaide, 1,700 miles away, and I drove my car over the Nullarbor Plain, and somewhere out in the middle I came across this camp of Aboriginal people, and they're all speaking in language which of course I couldn't understand a word of, and I saw where they lived. They lived in these sort of bark huts about 2 or 3 meters in diameter, and there were no brick walls, and they were all very close, and they had to be close for 2 reasons. There weren't any farms or factories until about 12,000 years ago. We started to get farms, and far later we started to get factories. So the only food was the fruit and leaves and roots and nuts and seeds and berries of the natural growing plants and trees in nature. And they didn't have refrigerators. So every day or every second day they had to walk out and gather enough food and be back to the camp before it got dark, because there was no electric lights. And so if the group had more than about 150 people in it, there wouldn't be enough food. And starvation was one of the main killers in those days. The main things that people died early of in those days were childbirth, infections, physical injuries, and starvation during famines. And the group couldn't be too small because they had to protect one another from wild animals. Now humans dominate the animal world, But in those days, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans had to be quite careful about wild animals which could attack them. So people nearly all lived in groups of 30 to 150 people. If they lived on their own, they didn't survive very long. If there was 200, they went hungry pretty often. So closeness to people that you're like is how we got our chemistry and our electricity. And today we hardly know our next door neighbours, and our next door neighbours could have been born 100 miles away or on the other side of the country or the other side of the world. And so we need closeness. Humans need closeness. We need closeness, affection, love, touching, and loneliness. Science has now proved that loneliness is as damaging as 15 cigarettes a day. Lonely people get old sooner, get sick sooner, die sooner. So we need to have a high vegetable fibrous diet, and we need to have closeness to other people, at least some of whom are like us. I say, and I try to do it myself, that we need the 3 P's: people, purpose, and pleasure. And some people think I'm crazy. I'm 87 and I spent all this time on developing mental health. But I look at my friends and at other people who've got no purpose in life, really, and they're just going downhill. I'm the healthiest of all the people I know in my age group. And when I get up in the morning, I start to work on these things, and I usually work every day, Saturday and Sunday, for quite a few hours. And then in the late afternoon, I go to a coffee shop and read the paper. Paper's not very good. The only paper that used to be worth reading in Perth, in my opinion, was the Financial Review. And that doesn't mean that I was particularly interested in money, but it was an honest sort of a paper, a factual sort of paper, not full of rubbishy advertisements. And that's probably helped to save my life, or to extend it, because I had pretty badly controlled blood pressure. And I was taking 4 blood pressure medicines. Well, 2, but one had 3 blood pressure medicines in the one tablet and another tablet. And I had a very irregular heartbeat. And I went to a cardiologist, and they did all the tests and said, oh, nothing we can do about it. Uh, that was in 2016. And in 2021, I went back to see him again. I was so worried about my very irregular heartbeat. Did all the tests, nothing you can do. And then I read in the Financial Review about a Chinese lady doctor in Melbourne who was studying aldosterone, which is a hormone made in our adrenal glands right next to where adrenaline gets made. And aldosterone was the cause of about 10% of the world's high blood pressure. But Japan was the only country in which the blood was routinely tested for aldosterone. And I'm pretty sure a lot of those men who used to die at 2 o'clock in the morning from a heart attack or a stroke had undiagnosed aldosterone problems. Anyway, it's also related to posture. It's worse when you lie down, so it's worse during the night. And I'd always taken my blood pressure during the day and it was all okay. But then I found that at 10 o'clock at night it was high. So I thought I'd better get my blood tested for aldosterone. Seemed like I might have that problem. But my usual doctor, because I'm not registered now, so I can't order tests or write prescriptions, I asked him, can you give me the bit of paper to go and have my blood test for aldosterone? He just laughed at me. He said, oh yeah, I haven't got it. He just wouldn't give me the bit of paper. So I went down the road and saw a lady doctor who'd never heard of it, but she gave me the bit of paper. I went and got it, and I've got that problem. I've got the aldosterone problem. And once I got, the Chinese lady doctor, her father, 64-year-old engineer father, had was on 4 kinds of blood pressure medicine and wasn't well controlled. And when she tested him for aldosterone and found he had the aldosterone problem, a quarter of one tablet fixed him. Well, I wasn't that lucky, but 2 blood pressure medicines now control my blood pressure much better. I'm rambling a bit, aren't I? Yeah. Blood pressure is interesting. This is my wrist blood pressure machine. And when I was a practicing doctor, I always used to tell people, no, don't get those wrist ones. It's more accurate. The nearer you take your blood pressure to your heart, the more accurate it is. But of course, to take your blood pressure up on your upper arm, you have to take your coat off or your jumper off and roll your sleeve up. And not a problem in summer, but it is a problem in winter. And once I found that my blood pressure was high at night and not in the day, I got a wrist blood pressure thing, and I found that it was how often you took it more than exactly what it was. It didn't matter whether it was 120 or 130, but it mattered a lot if it was 100 or 160. And you just didn't know that if you didn't take it, and if you didn't take your blood pressure at different hours of the day. So I'm now a wrist BP machine man. Although I've been working with a couple of engineers for 2 years trying to measure blood pressure through the eye, which you can do in 10 seconds, because in the back of the eye is the only place where you can look directly at blood vessels. Everywhere else they're covered, but in the back of the eye you can see the arteries, and you can see them pulsing each time your heart beats. But sadly, the engineer who knew most about eyes got cancer, and our project crashed. But I'm sure that sooner or later someone is going to produce an instrument that measures the blood pressure in the back of your eye in 10 seconds. And that's going to save a lot of doctors 5 minutes quite a few times a day. When you walk into the surgery, the secretary will just say, "Oh, just look at this, and just look at that, and she got your blood pressure," and then the doctor doesn't have to spend 5 minutes waiting for you to take your clothes off and so on. Something that I learned comparatively recently, that I should have known a long time ago and didn't, was how addictive substances work. Addictive substances give you relief from some distress, or make you feel better in some way that you want. So you feel bad, you feel low or slow or whatever, and caffeine or nicotine or crystal meth or cocaine or ecstasy gives you a lift. Or you're anxious and worried and can't sleep, and alcohol calms you down, or heroin calms you down, or addictive painkillers calm you down. And so why are they addictive? How does addictiveness work? Well, it works like this. You have some distress, and this chemical relieves that distress, but as it's relieving that distress, your body's chemistry produces a little bit of resistance to that addictive chemical. So the next time you get that distress, you have to take a bit more of the chemical, because it not only has to relieve the distress, it has to overcome that little bit of resistance. So when you take more, you get more resistance. Then the next time you have to take even more of that chemical, because you've got to relieve the distress, and you've got to overcome a greater amount of resistance. And so it gets worse and worse and worse. You have to take more and more and more to get relief and to overcome the increasing resistance. And you end up taking a lot of it, and it ends up not doing much for you because you've got so much resistance. But you can't stop it, because your chemistry's been so changed by having that foreign substance that you feel dreadful without that foreign substance, and you hang out, as they say, or crave. So if that's how addiction works, how is it best to stop addiction? Well, you just do the reverse. when you get the distress and they get the urge to take the addictive substance, the substance you've got an addiction to, you delay taking the addictive substance as long as you can. Might only be half an hour, but you delay it, and you take a bit less, maybe not a lot less, maybe only 10% less. But when you delay and take less, that reduces your addiction because it allows your chemistry to come back to normal a bit. And the delay and the reduction means your chemistry can come back a bit more towards normal. That makes it easier the next time to delay a little bit longer and to take a bit less. Now, the tough oldies of AA will say, oh, you just got to go cold turkey. Just stop. Just go cold turkey. Great if it works, but it very often doesn't work. People suffer too much, so they stop for a day, and then the next day they go back to their addiction. Or they might even manage to stop for 3 days, and then they go back to their addiction. And even if they do quit, every day is a battle, a nasty, unpleasant battle to avoid relapsing, and sooner or later a lot of people who quit cold turkey do relapse. So in my experience, it's mostly better if every time they get the urge to have their addictive substance, people delay taking it and reduce it a little bit. And that's helped, very much helped, if they can get a medicine that does a bit of what the addictive substance does but isn't addictive. So if you can delay taking your addictive substance for half an hour and reduce it by 5 or 10% just by willpower, if you can take some medicine as soon as you start to feel the craving or the problem, you may be able to delay taking the addictive substance for an hour instead of half an hour, and you may be able to reduce it by 10% instead of 5%. And that allows your chemistry to come much more back to normal, which reduces the craving, and then you may be able to delay taking the addictive substance for 1.5 or 2 hours, and to reduce it by 15 or 20%. For instance, with the right medicine, most people who want to quit tobacco smoking can reduce their smoking by about 25% every 2 or 3 weeks. So after 2 or 3 months, they're down low enough and their chemistry has come back normal enough that they can quit. But it's not so good if they just concentrate and or the clinic or the doctor just concentrates on reducing the addiction and doesn't also focus on finding the mental health or other disorder that caused them to seek relief from the substance in the first place. So the best way to get off an addiction is you find what sorry, excuse me. The best way to get off an addiction is diagnose the distresses, the mental health disorders that first cause them to take the addictive substance, and treat that with therapy and understanding the right 1 minute videos and the right medicine. Also give them a non-addictive medicine that helps them to delay taking the addictive stuff and to take less. Because addiction is not handled properly in so many places, what they do is just put the addict on an addictive medicine. When I started, it was methadone, and methadone is about 5 times as addictive as heroin, and methadone is a bit better than heroin, but not a lot better. It has so many side effects, lethargy, lack of energy, and it ties them down. They've got to go to the same pharmacy to get their medicine every day. Because it's so addictive, they can't be trusted to take the medicine home. They have to go to the pharmacy every day and get it, and that can interfere with their employment and cause them to be semi-doped or lethargic, not focusing very well. So to get off an addictive substance, delay taking it as long as you can each time you get the urge. Take a little bit less and less and less each time. Well, and before that, diagnose what caused the person to go to street drugs for relief in the first place, and relieve that with non-addictive treatments, and also give them a medicine which does a bit of what the addictive substance does. If the addictive substance is a downer, like alcohol, addictive medicines, marijuana, heroin, addictive painkillers, give them a downer, non-addictive downer. There aren't many. The pharmaceutical industry makes as many things as addictive as possible, and sadly almost all the calming medicines have been addictive. I looked hard and long for a non-addictive calming medicine. When I started in practice, it was barbiturates, and they were addictive. And then in the 60s we got Valium, and there was one before Valium, I can't remember what it was, and Seropax and Mogadon and all sorts of things that were all addictive. Ambien, Stilnox, which is another group of medicines which are very addictive. And the medicine I found was an interesting story. It's called baclofen, and it is slightly addictive, but it's the least addictive of all the medicines that I could find. And what happened was I found a book called The End of My Addiction. And The End of My Addiction was written by a professor of cardiology in New York who had a terrible alcohol problem. And he'd been to 3 of the best rehabs and always relapsed, and he'd taken every treatment there was for alcohol and he always relapsed. He had a pretty severe anxiety problem. He was a brilliant pianist, and when he was a teenager in France, because he was French, Dr. Olivier Amerson. He used to play the piano before big crowds, and he used to get very anxious, but it wasn't hard to get alcohol in France, and that calmed him down. But then he studied medicine, which is not easy, and his anxiety got worse, and his addiction to alcohol got worse, until in the end he used to have blackouts and he had to stop practicing as a doctor. But in New York there was a woman doctor who had a paraplegic patient who was addicted to cocaine, and this paraplegic man had not been able to stop cocaine. He tried, but he couldn't. And paraplegics and quadriplegics get awful muscle spasms, and baclofen, which is 100 years old and was originally for epilepsy but was superseded by better epilepsy medicines, was the best thing for muscle spasms. So this lady doctor gave baclofen to her paraplegic cocaine addict, and that stopped his muscle spasms, but it also stopped his cocaine addiction. And this got written up in the New York newspapers, and Professor Olivier Amerson read about it in the New York papers and thought, well, he had nothing to lose. He tried everything else and it hadn't worked. So he tried baclofen, and on normal doses it didn't work, but he took big doses, over 200 milligrams a day, and it just fixed his alcoholism beautifully. So well that although he didn't want to drink alcohol very often, sometimes he was in a social situation where he more or less was pressured and he could have one drink and stop, whereas the vast majority of alcoholics who quit only have to have one drink and they're gone. But baclofen helped him so much that that alcohol was no longer a problem for him, and he wrote the book The End of My Addiction. So I read this book, The End of My Addiction, by Professor Olivier Amerson, and about 30 years ago I was looking after 100 paraplegics and quadriplegics in a nursing home, and often gave them baclofen for their muscle spasms, but didn't realise it was also a tranquilizer. So then I started to give my heroin addicts baclofen, and it worked wonderfully for them. They were so grateful for baclofen. But unfortunately, a couple of them took too much. I remember it was 2 of them that took too much. I can't remember one of them, but one of them I can remember and still picture. She was an Asian lady about 40, and her partner had recently overdosed and died on heroin. They were both taking heroin, and he died. And she was in a very low state, being addicted to heroin and having lost her partner and being in a foreign country. But baclofen was wonderful for her, but she got up to 9 tablets a day and I got a bit worried about that. It was still miles better than not having baclofen, but then I mixed baclofen with mirtazapine, which is a non-addictive calming antidepressant, and low-dose naltrexone, which is an opioid and alcohol blocker, and boosts your over 20 endorphins, which makes you feel a lot better. And she was good on that combination and was able to reduce the baclofen right down. And of course, it's more effective when you take less rather than more. And then I found that lots of medicines were better if you combine 2 or 3 rather than just one. So what I'm working on now is the most important things. I realize that I have been working in that field of what's important, but I've been a bit vague about it, a bit too general about it, and I need to be more specific and more pointed. And that's how I came to understand and write that we'd all be happier and healthier if we realized and thought about how we all started as tiny, helpless, dependent babies. And as we grew, we all had periods of unmet needs and nasty experiences. And none of us had perfect parents, and none of us had perfect families. And everyone's world and community had problems. And that distressed feelings and thoughts and behaviours could become habits, but habits can all be broken, and new, far better habits can always be made. So just before I finish this session, let me tell you how important habits are. Habits are very important. They make up 60 to 65% of our life. Our brain has got so much to do that it has to focus on the most important things, on the new things, and on the things that need to be changed. And everything that we do, often and much the same, it turns into a habit that can more or less forget about. You more or less just do it without thinking about it, without deciding about it, without much effort. 1/3 of our life is the habit of sleeping, and another 30% of our life is other habits, things that we do with very little thought and very little effort. And one of the most important habits of all is to smile as often as you can. You mustn't smile when you're angry. When you're angry, that means something needs to be fixed. Probably best not to smile when you're lonely, because when you're lonely, that means that something needs to be fixed. And if you didn't feel lonely, you wouldn't know that you didn't have enough contact with other human beings similar to yourself. And if you never got angry, you wouldn't realize that there's something wrong, there's something bad that needs to be fixed. It's funny, when I got appendicitis, I got pain in the lower right tummy. I knew I had to find a surgeon and get my appendix taken out. And I had an uncle who died in the back blocks of Western Australia, because when he got appendicitis, it took 2 days to get the appendix removed, by which time the infection had spread and it was too late and he died. So if appendicitis didn't cause pain, it would kill a lot of people. They just keep on doing what they were doing and the infection would kill them. But appendicitis hurts, and it hurts badly enough that you find a doctor and get your appendix taken out before the infection spreads. It's funny, it's let's see, it's 62 years since I was working in the children's hospital, but I can still remember this boy, about 8, who came in with appendicitis, and he'd had it a bit too long, and when we took his appendix out, there was pus and it spread everywhere, but we had antibiotics, so that fixed it. So some pain and some anger and some loneliness and some worry, or not a worry but alertness and care, is necessary for safety reasons and to get things done that need to be done. But as much as you can, develop the habit of smiling, and your life will be much better, and your endorphins will be better, so your immune system will be better, so you'll be less likely to get infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases, or cancer. Okay, well, I'll see you in the morning, because I do a session on Sunday morning now. Thank you. Bye. Oh,